Once again, it is good to be with you tonight. I would like to, for those who were not here yesterday, to recapitulate some of the thoughts. But if I do that, I may never get through the rest. But somehow, as we follow on from yesterday, you will pick up, and during question time, and once again, everyone is free to interrupt at any point during this discourse, and I shall be willing to answer immediately if I have the knowledge that point which you raise. So do not feel inhibited in doing so. For those who were not here yesterday, we began speaking about water. We finished halfway, and we're going to carry on. Just one thing I would like to recapitulate from yesterday, and to just add another word in that area. As we said yesterday, water is so very common. It is common in the world. 75% of the Earth's surface is water. It is very common in our bodies. 75% of our body is water. Most of us treat water as of no consequence because it is always there. And yet I want to just, as a background, to keep in the back of your mind as we look at other information today, the place of water in God's plan, something that is so common and that we do not put much value on. Yet in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, the Bible says, verse 1, "And he, God, showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb." Here John pictures a river of water coming from God's throne in heaven. Something so very common on earth, which most of us ignore. Yet it occupies a central place in the divine plan, coming out from the very throne of God, and on either side of the river of life, one finds the tree of life. So bear this thought in mind as we continue to look at water and the implications which it has for us as individuals. I'll just pause for a while until our friends come in. When you hear that word, what comes to your mind? Fat. Different things will come. Fat. Energy. Fat. Life force. Life force. If you really wanted to get the maximum amount of energy in one go, one step, you felt really lacking in energy, and you wanted something which maximized your energy deficiencies, and you could only have one thing to do it, one choice, what would you choose? Fruit, right? Fruit. One would choose fruit. One choice.
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Honey. And I'll put beside that the generic carbohydrates. Carbohydrates. Coca-Cola. All right, we include glucose under the carbs. Honey, carbs, glucose as a catch-all. Carbohydrates, honey, fruit.
If I want to be more specific on fruit, can I put raisins?
Raisins, all right. We'll put raisins here. It also comes on the carbohydrates because of its sugar content.
Molasses fall under it.
Molasses, yes, falls onto this. Why do they give you energy? Because they contain calories. Now, suppose I said to you that if I had one choice, I would choose water. Crazy? Because you accept that I speak with authority? I want you now to be really frank.
As well as that. No, otherwise, I can if it is.
All right?
If you've been climbing and you're exhausted, what do you want?
Water. Now, this is what gives you energy. How many calories are in water? 0. If there are no calories in water, and there are none, how can I hope to depend on water as my major source of energy if there are no calories?
Because it lets your blood flow quicker. That means nutrients go faster through your system. That means it creates energy.
All right, it makes the blood flow faster. There's more accessibility to all the parts of my body, so the increased water helps the blood to carry the calories.
Also cleanses and takes the extra weight out of the body.
All right,
Extra things you don't need.
all right, it cleanses and removes deleterious things, harmful toxins, which draw on my energy sources out of my body, so it leaves me feeling better. Now, all those things are true, but I want to introduce you to something about water which makes it the most tremendous source of energy. For most of the energy that you feel in your body, that is if you are living right, most of the energy comes from water. And a very small part, about 25%, comes from all of these things put together. So all the calories you eat in food, whether they be from carbohydrates or from fat, only produces a minor part of your total energy content, and most of your energy comes from water, which is totally lacking in calories. And for those of you who've run marathons or went on long hikes and you're really tired and really you have flaked out, once you drink some water, almost instantaneously, you are full of energy again and ready to continue running, and yet you have eaten no calories. How can we explain this? In order to explain this, I want to go back once again to the cell, and bear with me as I take you through, in simple terms, what goes on in a cell, and then I'll come back to the implications of water. So just quietly go with me through this next section. Something to rub the... Yeah. All right. Just all of that. I want us to look at tonight, to look at the basic concepts in a cell against the background of water, and then we'll get on to things which are more relevant to you. Thank you very much. Here is a cell. And I want us to conceptualize the cell as a factory. A factory which is geared up for production. It doesn't matter what the end product is, whatever it is in the body, whether thyroid hormone or some enzyme or whatever. This is a cell, and it is equipped to produce a product that is essential to my body. But we'll think in terms of a factory. This is the factory site with the appropriate wall which defines the factory area. What do I need in this factory to develop my product? Peter, would you like to start off? You're building a factory and you're going to produce cornflakes. Soap powder.
Energy.
All right. I need a source of energy. Energy production. Energy. And so my cell is filled with mitochondria. And here, all the energy in the cell is produced. The energy which is necessary to serve all the machinery within my cell. So my mitochondria are designed to generate energy. And all my energy in the body is stored in little packages, discrete packages called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, concentrated energy packed in a small size, rather like all that energy packed within the nucleus of an atom. So, mitochondria, I've got that. What else? Factory. Raw materials. I need storage houses for raw materials. So up here, we'll have our storage houses for storage. And all the raw materials that come into my cell are stored in these vacuoles. And that also is surrounded by its own membrane. The mitochondria is surrounded by its own membrane. Within the membrane of the cell, the wall of the factory. What else?
Disposal of rubbish.
We need disposal of rubbish. And so down here, I will have my disposal, my rubbish disposal units, rubbish and waste, and those are called lysosomes. Lysosomes. Within this membrane enclosed space, all rubbish, all toxins are collected and degraded by particular chemicals inside before they are released to the outside for excretion through urine, sweat, feces, or my breath. What else? Boxes? Yeah. Boxes for storage, transport. I'll use it for transport this time. So now we have transportation boxes, and these are called secretory vesicles, transportation boxes. And what these do when they're ready, they migrate to the wall of the cell, and they make contact with the cell, and then they open a door, and the contents move out into the blood, and then the door closes off again, and they go back to perform their transportation work. For they're traveling always throughout the cell. What else do I need? Machinery for production. And so here I will have my machinery, production machinery. And these are called ribosomes. I have to introduce them because I'm going to talk about them in a minute. On these ribosomes, specially constructed, we have a production line on which the raw elements arrived, they are put together, and they are sent off. The production line. Next.
Something that controls it.
Something that controls everything. And so right here in the middle, we are going to put our nucleus. Here is our nucleus, which is the computer center, which coordinates and regulates everything that goes on in this factory site, in the cell. And within this nucleus, we have our chromosomes. And on the chromosomes, we have our genes. And that gene is a collection of DNA. And that DNA contains all information that is appropriate to the life, survival, and function of the cell. It contains everything. Next.
I suppose that's with communication as well, communication system.
It has a communication system. Now, what happens here? What kind of a communication system do we need? Information arriving, information getting to the nucleus, and information from the nucleus to the respective parts of the cell. Remember last night, we said that this membrane really is a double membrane. And between these double membranes, we have water running. Now bear a little with me. When we look at this membrane, it isn't really a straight line like that. That membrane consists of molecules that we call phospholipids, which has a head that dissolves in water and a tail of fat, which doesn't like water. And so on the outside of the membrane, we have these phospholipid molecules arranged like that. And within the cell, this is the interior of the cell, we have other phospholipid molecules, but turned upside down. So this really is the membrane. And running between the cells, we have a river of water. So that whatever comes through the membrane, there's a river of water here which can send things quickly around the cell membrane to other parts of the cell as necessary. Now, as information comes to the cell from whatever form, whether the nerves bring the information, or whether hormones, chemicals bring the information, or food and nutrients, whatever brings the information, when they come to the membrane, they first come in contact with a receptor. So here we have a receptor which acts as a security guard, reading the message and deciding if something should enter or they should be locked out. And this receptor, as we said 2 days ago, has special shapes, so that if this receptor is shaped like a V, then whatever message comes along must fit it like a lock and key. And if that receptor does not recognize that messenger, then the door or the canal will not open. Once it is allowed to go inside, whatever stuff came along, as it goes inside, passing through the outer layer of phospholipids, coming across the river, passing through the inner layer of phospholipids, and coming inside the cell, by various chemical reactions, it produces another chemical that sends a messenger right to the DNA. Having arrived and delivered its message, a system in the cell transcribes or copies the information which the nucleus wants to send to the production line. And so a copy is made of that part of the DNA which is stimulated by that message which has arrived from the outside. And once that is made, that acts as a messenger, and that is called messenger RNA. That messenger RNA leaves the cell, carrying the information, and transfers that information to another molecule which is made on the ribosomes called transfer RNA, messenger, transfer. That transfer RNA, having gotten the message from the messenger RNA, then travels to the storehouses, the vacuoles, and collects all the raw materials which are necessary to produce the product. And as it travels around to the vacuoles for fats, vitamins, minerals, carbohydrates, it brings them all together and deposits these things in the ribosomes. The ribosomes follow the message, turns out the right product, and then when it is finished, ships it out to be packaged in the packaging area called the Golgi apparatus. There it is packaged in the appropriate packages, but some things have their own packages, other things have their own packages, and somehow each package is labeled with an address. For each substance has to be sent to the appropriate address. Otherwise, what's the point of making something and it ends up in the wrong mailbox? So within the Golgi apparatus, all the various productions which are made are packaged, labeled, and then when the time is right, each package is sent out into the secretory vesicles, which then travel to the membrane, makes a door, and releases the product out into the bloodstream, and the blood takes it on its appropriate way to whatever organ needed that product. All of these activities are overseen by the nucleus, but the power to charge all of these things comes from the mitochondria, where the energy is generated. Whatever rubbish needs to be gotten rid of are sent by appropriate vesicles with the appropriate address, and they end up in the lysosomes. Within the lysosomes, they are appropriately destroyed to become non-toxic, and once they are ready for disposal, they are shunted back to the vesicles, sent to the membrane, and then they are sent away. Now, all of this, I come back now to the point of our lecture, all of this is done within water. For the cell is 75% water. Water lies within the membrane, and there's water outside the cell, which is keeping the chemical environment appropriate so that the cell can do its work. So there's water everywhere. Now within that cell, let's take the smallest cell in a bacterium, E. coli, the bacteria which fills our colon. Within that cell, which is only 2 micrometers long and 1 micrometer in diameter, for those who can't quite remember what a micrometer is, it is 1/10 to the 6th, 1/millionth part of a meter. If you divide 1 meter into 1 million parts, the length of this cell is 2 micrometers and the diameter is 1. Clearly, we cannot see it. But within that small cell, with all this apparatus and with all this activity, we have 1,800 different kinds of molecules, 2,400,000 different proteins, 14,000 messenger RNA, carrying the messages for the production of 14,000 different products, which this cell needs not just to send away to another part of the body, but substances to repair, to manufacture, to create the vesicles and the Golgi apparatus and the ribosomes, to create the lysosomes, the storehouses. All of those things need to be manufactured, repaired, maintained, and energized by the nucleus, as well as creating things for export. And if anything should happen along and damage the membrane, then straight away the nucleus will have to generate proteins to repair the membrane so that it doesn't leak. But while it is repairing it, the cell still has to continue doing the job which is demanded by the other cells which are not connected to it. The cell cannot afford to stop and go to sleep, because if they did, we wouldn't function. So while doing its job, the cell must repair itself, and that is the function of these 14,000 messenger RNAs. But because there are so many different kinds of raw materials to be collected, then you need 200,000 transfer RNAs to collect everything and bring them to the ribosomes. What do we have in our storehouses? 22 million fat molecules and 280 million small metabolites like sodium and potassium and calcium. And we have 2,400,000 proteins. And all of these things are jostling within the cytoplasm, the inner part of the cell, which is 75% water. Now, that's a tight squeeze. But everything does its work well. If the inner part of the cell, with all its water, becomes too acid, because it cannot get rid of its acid too much, or if it becomes too viscous, because we are dehydrated, then all of these functions are compromised. Because when you change the acidity, that is the pH, or you change the viscosity of the fluid, everything becomes stuck. Therefore, nothing really works very well. So in dehydration, we are compromising all of these things. And no wonder we begin to feel unwell, because all of these functions are done within water. An absence of water in the membrane means that the transfer of messages from the outside to within, that also becomes compromised. Now, just a little bit more before I press on to some practical details. In the cell, we have 75% water. But outside the cell, we have 94% water. So we have more water outside the cell than within the cell. When you have this difference in water content, from your experience, what is the normal flow of water? In what direction will water flow? We have 75% of water within the cell, and outside the cell is 94% of water. That is, outside is more dilute than inside. In what direction will water flow? Back to your physics. Inside. It will go from lesser concentration inside. That is the normal flow because there's a difference in concentration. Now, within the membrane, there are pumps. Electronic pumps. And these pumps will pump things in and pump things out. Let's say that sugar, glucose, arrives from the blood. How will it go across? There is a pump there which pumps in glucose. And these pumps will pump in cations, sodium, and potassium, and hydrogen. So these are electronic pumps for anything that needs to go in. And you need energy to make these pumps function so that the cell can be right. As the factory works, it produces a lot of acid as a waste product. And acid is mainly hydrogen ions. The pH, or the acidity of the inside of the cell, is around 7.4 for maximum health. But let me talk a little bit about pH. It means acidity. Here is a spectrum, and here is the neutral point. The pH from 1 to 7, that is acid. 1, greater acidity than 7. When the pH is 7 to 14, this is alkaline, the opposite of acid. If your pH, or the acidity within your cell, falls below 6.8, you die. If the alkalinity, or the pH, rises above 8, you die. So your cell has to keep within these narrow limits, and this point is neutral, 7. The pH of your cells is normally kept in health at 7.4. Slightly alkaline. Remember, acidity kills. Too much alkalinity kills. The neutral point of our cells, 7.4, just a little higher than the neutral pH. The function of the cell is to keep the acidity inside just right. For if it varies too much, you will poison the cell. If there's not enough water, it becomes viscous and things just don't work. So within your cell, you always have an electronic pump which is busy pumping acid outside and pumping sodium and other elements inside. The movement of water, just the movement of water from an area of low dilution to within the cell, as the water moves through under its osmotic pressure, it drives the pumps. And there are millions of pumps in the membranes of our 100,000 million, billion, trillion cells. Pumps everywhere. And as water moves along, it turns those pumps just as the Victoria Falls, if there are generators at the bottom or turbines, as the water falls and turns the turbines, then the turning of the turbines generates electricity for the country, just by the movement of water. And when the turbines are turned and generates electricity, so when the water moves across the membranes, turning the electronic pumps, then it generates molecules and molecules and molecules of ATP, your packages of energy. A small part of energy production comes from the food which is burned in the mitochondria to generate energy to make the cell work. But the greater part of your energy comes from the passive movement of water across the cell membrane, generating ATP, which drives your body. Question, therefore, now. When you're very thirsty and you drink water and you're immediately energized and there are no calories in water, what makes you feel strong? The energy generated by water. And once your body begins to lose water, you feel drained of energy. You're just very tired and very exhausted. And the brain gets a little fuzzy and memory falls. And your ability to be very analytical and to focus on the computer screen or to do a math problem, that falls as your brain senses water lack and as the body becomes depleted of ATP. As long as there's water flowing all the time, your body will always have large amounts of energy, and the rest of energy you need to top up your energy stores, that comes from food. Now, many people who are weak, tired, and don't know that they lack water, they say, I have no energy. I am very weak. And they are right. And so what do? They say, oh, I'm so tired. I feel so weak. I have no energy. I must eat and have sugar, coffee, chocolate, stuff like that to top up the energy. And the energy does become topped up. But what's the price you pay? When you keep topping up your energy, which you think you are lacking because you are hungry, and so you eat food to top up the energy, and the energy levels rise because the mitochondria will take the food and the chocolate you bring to it and burn it and create energy to keep the cell running. But in topping up your energy that way, and you do feel energized, what is the price you pay? Not so much waste products. You gain weight because the food brings with it calories. So your energy goes up, but the calories turn into fat. And so as you eat food to energize yourself, you gain weight. But if you understand your body correctly, largely your energy stores, the depletion you feel, the fatigue, is really because you're lacking water. Your cells are dehydrated. Therefore, your supply of ATP goes down, so you feel weak and you're not thinking, and the body is saying to you through that part of the brain which ought to be working and which ought to be conscious of your body's needs, the part of the brain says, you know, I feel weak. I know I am thirsty. I am dehydrated. Let me drink water and fill myself up with water, and then whatever energy deficit is left, I will top it up with food. So we end up eating less food and more water. So we have good energy, but we are not fat. And many people become obese because they don't understand that their body is thirsty. And so they eat to compensate for the energy lack when they ought to be drinking first. Then after that, whatever is left, eat. In that way we eat well, but we don't get fat. And many people lose weight once they get back to appropriate water drinking. It sounds weird, but that's how the body works. Question.
When I'm tired and I'm hungry and everything else, I want to have a bath and I want to soak in water. Does your body actually absorb anything when you're having a bath? When I'm tired or hungry?
All right. When you're tired and you're hungry and you take a bath, you feel energized. Does the body absorb water? The skin really is almost impermeable to water. You don't get much water going through the skin, because if that happened and we went for a swim in the sea or we stayed too long in the bath, so the skin is made in such a way that it doesn't allow water to get in. And I'll tell you why. When you look at your skin, it really is a marvel. And some are very beautiful, others are not so beautiful, but we all try to have beautiful skin. But if you look at the skin is covered by a lot of cells. This is the top of your skin. And then down here you have bigger cells, and then down here bigger ones still. And then your skin stops. Under here is fat and blood vessels. Your skin grows from beneath. When you want to form new skin, these cells down here multiply and push the cells upwards towards the surface. And as the cells move upward, they die. So all the cells you're looking at on my skin, they're all dead. Dead cells. They have no life. And when I scrape it off, I'm just scraping off dead cells. But the beauty of these dead cells is that they contain a substance called keratin. Just like the substance I have on the sole of my feet, I walk, more keratin is formed, my sole gets thicker, so I don't feel pain so much. The same thing happens all over my skin, but the keratin layer is not as dense as on the soles of my feet, and these cells, with the presence of keratin, are water impermeable. So water can't get in. And the layer of dead cells is there to prevent the water down here from evaporating in the rays of the sun. So if I didn't have this dead layer of skin, I would be dehydrated by sweating all the time. And if I didn't have this dead layer of skin, then when I went to have a swim or a long bath, I would blow up. So the bath, which reduces your fatigue, is not so much because water goes in, which it can't, but because the sensation of the water is soothing. It goes to your sensory centers in the brain and creates a feeling of well-being, which then makes you feel good. But if you never drank and you bathed every day, you would soon die. Now, the point I want to make, probably took a long time to make it, is that most of our energy comes from the movement of water across the cell membranes, driving the electronic pumps like hydroelectricity, creating electricity, creating ATP, which the body and the cells then use to do all its work. So a lot of our chronic fatigue and our brain lack of sensitivity and lack of power is largely due, in the absence of other disease, to poor water intake. Now you may say to me, but I never get thirsty. I never get thirsty. Now, that also is natural, because within our brain cells, in our hypothalamus, right up here in my hypothalamus, there is a center which controls thirst. This is where I feel thirsty. It is not up in my cortex, which we looked at on Sabbath, but it's down in my autonomic area where I don't have to think about it. It tells me I am thirsty. And what it does, this hypothalamus consists of various brain cells or neurons which are sensitive to the concentration of salts coming through my blood. It's sensitive to the amount of sodium. It is sensitive to the amount of water. So as the blood passes into my brain, close to these cells in my thirst center, the cells read the levels of sodium, and when I'm dehydrated, the level of sodium will be high. The cells then pick up the high levels, they pick up the low levels of water, and they know that I need to drink. So these cells then produce a special hormone called histamine, and this histamine drives me to seek water. If I have no histamine, I will not drink. But it is because this is produced in large quantities, then I become conscious of my thirst, and the histamine message sends a message to my cortex where my cells for conscious action is, and these cells say, I know you are thirsty because the histamine tells me. Now I am suggesting to you that you look for water. In the meantime, these cells also produce another hormone called antidiuretic hormone, and that hormone goes through my blood, having been manufactured by these cells here according to the specifications which have arrived. And having made antidiuretic hormone, it goes to my kidneys, and it tells my kidneys the body needs water. Therefore, absorb all the water in your body, in the urine, send out the smallest amount of yellow, smelly, warm urine to get rid of the urea, and turn the rest back into the bloodstream in order to cut down the concentration of salt in my blood so that the cells may function. Now that's an excellent mechanism, but the problem is, as we get older, these cells lose their sensitivity, and they cannot respond very well to what is going on in the blood. So the older we get, the less thirsty we feel, even though the body is still sweating and passing urine and breathing water out. So you will often notice that the elderly will be sitting at home and their tongues are as dry as parched corn. Everything is dry and their skin sags and they're really not switched on. And you say, "Grandmother, do you want water?" She says, "No, my dear." "But you must be thirsty." "No, I just don't feel thirsty at all." And she'll sit there for days and weeks, and she will never ask you for a cup of water. And she'll become drier and drier because she really is not feeling thirst, although her cells are dying of thirst. And she dies from dehydration without feeling thirsty. Now, we can't stop this loss of sensitivity as we get older. So we have to use the cells in our cortex, in our reasoning area, which says, you know, my body is losing water, but though I don't feel thirsty, I must drink. And you drink not because you feel thirsty, for by the time you feel thirsty, it is already late. You are very dehydrated. And the other problem is, once you begin to feel thirsty and you're driven to drink, you drink a glass and a half, and you say, fine. Wrong. Because the thirst sensation will disappear before your body is adequately rehydrated. So you cannot replace your water just because your thirst sensation is gone. You must drink more than that to replace the water lost from your body. So water drinking becomes not a response to thirst, it should not be, but simply because every minute of the 24 hours I'm losing water from my skin, breathing water out. And you lose a lot of water from your breath. You breathe about 12 times a minute. How many times an hour? How many times a day? And every breath, you lose water. And if you're not really replacing it and sitting there, just not drinking, your body will begin to suffer. So drink water on principle. How much should you drink? Generally, we lose 2.5 liters a day. And because the body only makes 1 cup a day, we really must drink. We must replace what we have lost. Now, beverages like coffee and tea and alcohol, they are not water, although they contain water. For what the body needs to satisfy thirst and to make the cells work healthy, it needs free water. Not water molecules married to other things. For the body needs the water to dissolve the wastes, to eliminate them. Furthermore, some of the things we drink to quench thirst only make matters worse. Because any drink that contains caffeine, coffee and tea, caffeine is a diuretic which stops the kidney from reabsorbing. It blocks the kidney's action, so it cannot reabsorb water but allows all the water to pass out. Beer, alcohol, is a powerful diuretic. And so the more beer you drink, the more you pass urine. And that is why people can drink 12 cans of beer, 24 cans of beer at one sitting. Not because their body holds it all, but every time they drink, they lose more water than they took in beer. So they become dry, and so they must have another one, and another, and they spend all the time going to the bathroom. And they cannot understand why they can never be satisfied. Because alcohol acts as a diuretic. Caffeine in tea and coffee acts as a diuretic and dries out our body so that we worsen the level of dehydration. The body wants pure water, which come from vegetables and fruits in addition to pure water. Question?
How about sparkling water?
I'm sorry?
Sparkling water.
Sparkling water is fine. Yeah, because it's just carbon dioxide in it, and that just bubbles away, and even if you drank it, the carbon dioxide comes back out through your lungs. So sparkling water, not a problem.
How long can the body stay maximum without drinking water?
If you have no water at all, no water, not even in food, fruits, or vegetables, you're absolutely deprived of water, and in the appropriate hot sun, you will die within about 5 days. But before you die, you'll be totally delirious, and you will not even know you're dying, because the brain cells are totally confused.
Can you tie that with my question of yesterday on fasting?
All right? Please make the question again so that those who are not here can hear.
I asked yesterday that the Bible seems to suggest clearly that there will be times for Christians to fast. And it seems that Christ fasted without water, without food. So, based on what you've taught us on water, how should people handle fasting?
All right? How do we handle fasting for spiritual upliftment, for meditating, for dealing with a problem? How do we deal with fasting in the light of the body's needs for water? Of course, there are different degrees of fasting. Fasting doesn't mean that you totally abstain. Fasting may mean you cut down the amount of food you eat. You eat very simple food so that you do not burden the body with the work of digestion. You may drink water. Those who do a real fast, because their mind is occupied with an important subject, will deny themselves both water and food. Now, because the body has reserves of water, you can go without water for a day or two, or perhaps even 3. But if you go beyond that and take no water even in your food, then your ability to think will be damaged unless God is sustaining you by special miracles as he sustained Moses and Elijah and Jesus. Now, of course, when Jesus had his fast, we understand that at the end of his fast, he looked absolutely emaciated, and people didn't recognize him. And you remember when the fast ended, when his meditation ended, he fell to the ground. He was dying. But while he was fasting, God sustained him. But once the fasting was finished, his body was manifesting the effects of prolonged water abstinence. And had not the angels ministered unto him, he would have died in the wilderness. We cannot possibly try a 40-day fast with no water. His was a special mission, and he was equipped to do that. But at the end of it, he needed to be sustained, for he was at the point of death.
Over a period of time of abusing our cells,
Yes?
obviously the cellular memory would change, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
How long does it take, and can water actually help us to regain past cellular memory?
Yes?
How does one regain past cellular memory, or how does one install
Yes.
a good and healthy cellular memory
All right.
with water?
Good question. If we neglect hydration of the body, we'll damage cellular memory. Can we restore it? Can we regain it? How quickly can we do so? And how can we establish cellular memory? I'll backtrack a little and remind us how the cell adapts. When the cell is dehydrated, remember our bimolecular layer of phospholipids? The outer layer, the lipid tail, the fat tail, these black heads are the heads that are soluble in water. The inner layer, and the river running in between. When the body is dehydrated and the cell is not getting enough water, the cell says to itself, I must survive. The jobs I normally do, keeping production going, that is no longer a priority. My survival is priority, and the only organs I need to look after are the brain and the heart and the kidneys. I need those to keep going. So the brain will prioritize the water rationing and take most of the water to itself to keep alive. The rest of the cells will say, clearly not enough water is coming. Therefore, in order to prevent any unnecessary leakage of water from the cell, I must hold on to the water I have. And so the layers do this. So they move together and overlap to form a tight junction. And then this same cell, using the mechanisms which are inborn in the nucleus, begin to increase its amount of cholesterol. So cholesterol production goes up in the membrane. Cholesterol is not soluble in water. Therefore, this increased production of fat seals the membrane tightly so that leakage of water falls. Now, before I go on to answer your question, when you have increased production of cholesterol in the cells in order to make the junctions tight, what will happen in your blood vessels and the rest of your organs? Increased production of cholesterol, you begin to get fat. So people who live in a state of chronic dehydration produce more cholesterol right throughout the body, and that contributes to obesity. Question?
I just wanted to find out about, you explained how you don't drink as much, but you eat too much and then you get fat. What about those people who are, I'm sorry to use the word, but they're skinny?
Yes?
And yet they eat so much, they eat even more than what they're supposed to eat. And other people who perhaps eat even just one meal a day.
Yes.
And still they gain weight.
Yes.
And the ones who eat a lot remain skinny.
All right, how is it there's some people who are just skinny and they just never gain weight, and some eat only a little bit and then they gain weight? Now, this really has to do with the different metabolic rates, the different efficiencies in our different metabolic pathways, and each one of us is different. And I want to deal with that when we come to diet and how our appetite and our stomach manages food. It isn't just water which determines weight, it's just one factor. But some people, depending on their genetic makeup, respond this way to fat, while others can appear to abuse their water intake and never get fat. So if I may defer that until later on in the week.
Is it so valid to pre-hydrate? As in a long-distance running, you pre-hydrate as you pre-carb?
Yes? Is it valid to prehydrate? Yes, it is. When you're going to lose a lot of water, one must fill up